What is your favorite weird fact? I saw a news story on a woman with a rare type of epilepsy that causes her to see everything like a slideshow or video game that gets 10 FPS. She described watching cars drive by and saying they freeze in place for a moment and then snap into position further down the road over and over. Her entire life is played out in front of her eyes in still frames, and because of that, she wears blinders or earmuffs, because her senses are constantly contradicting one another, and it overwhelms her. About 3,000 people disappear every year in the US and are never found again. Abraham Lincoln's personal guard went out for a drink a few hours before his assassination. He met a man that was extremely jittery. The man was famed actor John Wilkes Booth. Eyewitnesses said that Booth was tense and was not sure he could, quote, do it. Nobody knew what he was going to do, but because he was such a famous actor, people wanted to help him calm his nerves. The personal guard and Booth had a few drinks together and soon left for the theater. Later, that same night, Booth assassinated Abraham Lincoln, while the personal guard was there on duty. Cotard's delusion is a rare psychiatric condition, severe cases of which cause the sufferer to wholeheartedly believe they're dead, putrefying, or simply do not exist. Some Cotard's patients refuse to eat, as they do not believe they need to, with one notable patient dying of starvation. Another woman once asked to be taken out to a morgue to be with the other dead people. I literally have a neighbor that has this, and I never knew what it was called. She constantly explains how she is dead and how her husband denies her from being buried or sent to the morgue. She sincerely believes she is dead, even if proved otherwise. Indian followers of the Zoroastrianism do not bury or burn their dead. Instead, they leave the bodies in special towers, exposed to the elements to be eaten by vultures. Unfortunately, the vultures are now endangered, leaving the bodies to slowly rot. When a person is electrocuted in the electric chair, they feel everything. They are fully aware of their bodies being fried as it happens in real time. One inmate who survived the first round of electrocution said it tasted like cold peanut butter. If given access to it, butterflies will happily drink blood. They'll also drink my pint of beer if unguarded. The US is still missing at least 6 nuclear bombs somewhere on the continent from Broken Arrow incidents. One is known to be near a Goldsboro NC B-52 crash site. It is estimated to be buried in 55 m of swamp muck. The arming switch was armed, but had detached from the bomb. A second bomb was recovered with 3 of 4 switches armed. The children's story of the Pied Piper of Hamelin was based on a real event. Hamelin town records start with this event. The earliest written record is from the town chronicles in an entry from 1384, which states, "It is 100 years since our children left. No one knows what or who took the children, but there is records of the entire town's children being taken." I actually did some research into this. Historians believe the children were not taken as in kidnapped. No mysterious man grabbed all the children and took off. Instead, an illness probably spread, which mostly impacted children, who have a weaker immune system and are not as strong. The illness probably killed most, if not all, of the children. Another theory is that the rat catcher did not kidnap them. Instead, the parents gave them to him as payment instead of money. Scafism. It's the worst way of execution I've ever heard of. The word comes from Greek, which stands for hollowed out. The victim is trapped between 2 boats, fed and covered with milk and honey, which then attracts all kinds of insects and vermin that fester and devour you over a couple of days. I once visited Warwick Castle, and I remember looking at an oubliette in the corner of the dungeon. It was nicknamed the Forgotten Chamber, if I recall right. They would open the grate, push the person inside the small L-shaped space that was so small you would basically always be sitting down with your shoulders and arms scraping against the walls either side. Then they would close the grate and leave you there. You'd literally be forgotten about and left there until you eventually went insane and died from malnutrition in this tiny, claustrophobic, silent space in the dark. The thought of it scared me to death. The idea of being left to starve to death in this tiny space under the ground. When you happen to be murdered, there's only an about 40% chance that your murderer will be found and punished. In 1844, there was a case of hysteria in a French convent of nuns. One started meowing, and after a week, all the nuns were meowing harmoniously in the afternoons. It didn't stop until neighbors called soldiers. There was a similar happening in Germany. The entire population of the village danced and partied themselves to death. That was likely more due to mold in the grain they used to make bread. They were literally tripping their faces off constantly. The island of Okinoshima in the inland sea of Japan is known for two reputable things. Number one, it's named Rabbit Island because of the overabundance of wild rabbits, and number two, the island has World War II ruins of a chemical weapons factory, creating poison-like mustard gas in its attacks on China. So vital was its secrecy to the Japanese government that they tried to wipe its location off the maps. There's a rare genetic disease called fatal familial insomnia, where over the course of months you literally cannot go or be put to sleep, no matter what you take or what you do. The symptoms get progressively worse until finally you stay awake, watching yourself go insane until you die from exhaustion. There is a guy by the name of Ricard Siegian who documented this genetic disease on YouTube, and with each video you can tell his mental state gets worse and worse. It eventually gets so bad that his last videos are just weird conspiracy theories, and as expected with a disease with no cure, he sadly passed away. Before he started suffering from it, since it can sit in your genetic code for years without you noticing, he was an artist. May he rest in peace. After getting stung by a cone snail, you don't feel the sting for a little bit. There's no anti-venom, and it can be lethal. Treatment is basically keeping the victim alive until the venom wears off. The bodies of the sailors who died on the Edmund Fitzgerald are still down there, almost perfectly preserved, due to the water at that depth being just barely above freezing. Divers who have explored the wreckage have seen their bodies frozen in place to parts of the ship, and have come back reporting that they feel as if they were being followed during their time underwater. Photos were taken, but per the request of the crew's family, they have never been released to the public. A human corpse decomposes 4 times faster in water than in the ground, and 8 times faster in open air than in the ground. Sky burial is such a crazy cool concept. When I'm dead, just throw me in the trash and then burn the trash so it gives the bar that nice smoky smell and it goes up in the air and turns into stars. That doesn't sound right, but I don't know enough about stars to dispute it. Anglerfish. When anglerfish mates, the male literally deforms its body and fuses with the female. Then they live together for the rest of their lives. The fulmar is a bird that defensively spits an orange oily substance at attackers. When the attacker tries to go wash the oil off its wings, it often drowns because it is no longer buoyant. Also, that quote-unquote stomach oil is a nutrient-rich food source, so feel free to make a fulmar spit it in your mouth. There was a man from France named Terraire, 1772 to 1798, who couldn't stop eating. By the time he was 17, his parents kicked him out. He was eating his own body weight in food daily at the time. When he enlisted in the army rations could not satisfy him. Often, he would sneak out at night and search for food in the garbage and the gutters. He was hospitalized, and doctors were trying to find a cure, but at night he would raid the morgue. Scientists were unable to stop him, so they studied him more. They fed him random things like eels that he'd swallow whole, as well as lizards, a kitten, and puppies, all of which he ate alive. When a 14-month-old baby disappeared, he was chased from the hospital by an angry mob. He later died of tuberculosis. He traveled France in the company of a band of thieves and prostitutes before becoming the warm-up act to a traveling charlatan. In this act, he would swallow corks, stones, live animals, and a whole basket full of apples. He then took this act to Paris, where he worked as a street performer. Among other things, he ate a meal intended for 15 people in a single sitting, ate live cats, snakes, lizards, and puppies, and swallowed eels whole without chewing. Despite his unusual diet, he was underweight, and with the exception of his eating habits, he showed no signs of mental illness, other than what was described as an apathetic temperament. General Alexander de Beauharnais decided to put Tarrere's abilities to military use and employed him as a courier for the French army, with the intention that he would swallow documents, pass through enemy lines, and recover them from his stool once safely at his destination. He would sneak out of the hospital to scavenge for food in gutters, rubbish heaps, and outside butchers' shops. He attempted to drink the blood of other patients in the hospital, and also to eat the corpses in the hospital morgue. At the autopsy, Tarrere's gullet was found to be abnormally wide, and when his jaws were opened, surgeons could see down a broad canal into the stomach. His liver and gallbladder were abnormally large, and his stomach was enormous, covered in ulcers and filling most of his abdominal cavity. It takes approximately 359 humans to have enough iron to forge a sword from their blood. When your organs are taken out of your body for abdominal surgery, they don't get placed back in carefully or specifically. You just put all the organs back in and the body sorts itself out. On top of that, some people are born with a condition called situs inversus, in which all their organs are a mirror image of what is normal. Having this automatically disqualifies you from being in the military. While most parents do what they can to prevent or stop their babies from crying, that's not always the case in Japan. That's because it's 400-year-old Japanese tradition that if a sumo wrestler can make your baby cry, it means he or she will live a healthy life. During a special ceremony, parents hand over their infants to sumo wrestlers, who bounce their precious tots up and down, and sometimes even roar in their little faces to get the tears flowing. He's not a baby that cries much, but today he cried a lot for us, and we're very happy about it, Mother Mei Shige said at a 2014 event. Dogs like squeaky toys because it sounds like a small animal being crushed. My son told me this fact just the other day. Our dog's squeaky toys don't seem so cute anymore. Female mummies in ancient Egypt were always more decomposed than their male counterparts. They discovered that this was because male bodies were embalmed a lot sooner than female bodies. Female bodies were kept at the family home until they started to decompose, in order to avoid necrophilia at the embalmers. If heat death of the universe turns out to be correct, then trillions of years from now, the universe will reach a point of absolute entropy. Time, as we understand it, will have no meaning. On a long enough timeline, stars stop forming because gas and dust particles become too rare to form a sufficient mass to produce fusion. The existing stars will slowly, gradually exit their main sequence and become red giants, then collapse to dwarf stars. Eventually, even the dwarfs, the faintest light in the universe, will blink out. Their matter will be consumed by black holes. Many trillions of years of Hawking radiation will bleed away black holes until everything reaches a state of unending changelessness. No physical processes will exist to mark the difference between one moment to the next. No biological or chemical reactions, no atoms, and no movement, and no light. Time as a linear concept will not exist, because nothing will exist that could justify the presence or effects of time. Sir, this is a Guitar Center? Thanks for supporting Ask Planet.